Hello and welcome. The last lines of communication into Bakhmut are seriously under threat, but at the same time, Russian military bloggers are afraid of a coming massive Ukrainian counteroffensive. This and also some more shenanigans with Prigozhin in the situation report. There have been further Russian attacks close to Dvorichna. The town of Ryanikivka is still contested, even though the map here, which is pro-Ukrainian, shows it in Russian control. There is fresh video of fighting inside of the town, so it seems to be that this area is still contested and not yet in Russian hands. There's also a report from the Ukrainian side that they have entered the town of Kuzemivka, which is here close to Svatove, indicating that the Ukrainians are actually still attacking on the front line in Luhansk, north of the Siversky Donetsk. Other than that, we have further reports of massive Russian attacks around Crimea. No further advances that can be somewhat verified though, and there's reports of a Ukrainian counterattack in the direction of Chervonopopivka. So in this region, the initiative clearly still lies on the Russian side, but it's far less one-sided than it has been roughly 2 or 3 weeks ago. South of the Siversky Donetsk, we have further number of Russian attacks continuing, reports of Russian attacks. In the area of Bakhmut, the Russians have attacked in the direction of Salisianske. Salisianske here. There's also reports that Orikhiv, Vasilivka is either partially or fully conquered. The Russians are reporting it, though I don't have independent verification yet. Clear is only that they push in this direction. It's not clear how far they've actually reached. There's also reports of attacks coming from the Dubovo-Vasilivka region and in the direction of Bodanivka down here, and this is one of the lines of communication. The other one is going this way. Both of them are seriously under threat as of now. Russian military bloggers are also saying that Wagner has actually crossed the Bakhmutivka river in this regard, so they are now entering Bakhmut from the east over the river. There's also fighting in the north and in the direct south of the town, obviously the other way around. This is the north and this is the south. But the fighting there is continuing. Russians are likely gaining ground slowly, but no big advances recently that have been reported. What is more interesting, though, is that we have Russian military bloggers talking about what is happening here, and they are saying a massive Ukrainian counteroffensive is. They expect a Ukrainian counteroffensive that will happen there with fresh reserves, that the Ukrainians are going to attack around Bakhmut. And they even say around 70,000 soldiers of Ukraine are now concentrated in the Bakhmut region. We were in the past few days where the talks were that 5,000 Ukrainian fighters might fight in Bakhmut, which would mean, if that is true and if the Russian side is actually correct with this, 65,000 soldiers would be somewhere in that area. Obviously, we cannot say what do they consider Bakhmut area. Is it this direct region, which I would consider Bakhmut area, or are they more or less counting everything in this region? We don't have any clear idea, but at least from their point of view, they're expecting a serious Ukrainian counterattack at Bakhmut. Also, talk is about them maybe cutting off the spearheads that are aiming to envelop Bakhmut, thus creating their own envelopments in this regard. We've had Ukrainian attacks in the north in the past here, roughly in this area. We've had Ukrainian counterattacks close to Ivanivska. The Ukrainians have gained some ground there in the last few days, but generally, at least if we listen to the Russian side, we should expect massive Ukrainian counterattacks that are far bigger than what we've seen so far in the last few days. Whether that's a wise decision is obviously a different question, but as of now, it's hard to tell from an outside view without having any inside knowledge. There's also been additional fighting around Avdiivka. The Russian are claiming that they have had some success in Krasnohorivka, which is here. They had some in the past few days, but whether they had successes recently in the last 2 or 3 days since the last situation report, I cannot confirm. Also fighting around the southern crescent, more or less, that is around Avdiivka. There's also fighting continuing here. I cannot confirm any advances though. Around Marinka is also additional fighting. No advances that I can really confirm. Pobjeda is under pressure, but I have not read any confirmation that the Russians advanced in this direction. I actually have not heard about additional fighting at Vuleda. So while there's likely some fighting, some engagement there, some artillery shelling, which is obviously there's artillery fire along the whole front line, that didn't seem to have happened any bigger attacks in the Vuleda region. On the southern front, we have a continuing entrenchment efforts that are being reported. The Russians are still improving their fortifications in the area, not just in southern Zaporizhzhia, but also in Kherson and even on Crimea. And again, artillery fire happening along the front line. The Ukrainians strike usually with HIMARS deep into the Russian-held territory to destroy supply points, troop concentration, logistics, etc., while the Russians are hitting towns often along the front line. For instance, Kherson itself is almost shelled daily, and there are reports of S-300, for instance, hitting Zaporizhzhia. So the air-to-ground, ground-to-air missile, the SAM systems that are being used in a ground-to-ground role in this regard. When we come to the overall situation, we can take a look at Riba. Riba is a pro-Russian, you could say a propaganda site, a military blogger, extremely professional, high-quality maps, as you can see here, and you can see how they are politically by basically showing these areas as part of Russia that is not controlled. And here, when we look at the Bakhmut sector, we have how the pro-Russian side is seeing that, and even they are still showing that the lines of communications are open, even though they are massively under pressure. And you see where they claim the advances that have happened recently. The map is though from yesterday, so the latest developments are not in it yet, but the lines of communication seem to be open still at this very point. When it comes to the mobilization, we had reports in the last 6 weeks. There were roughly 24, probably more, videos from mobilized personnel that have complained about the treatment by DNR officers. A lot of mobilized units have been handed over to the DNR, probably to make up for the losses, and they say they are more or less being used as cannon fodder, which kind of would make sense, as we've heard in the past that the DNR personnel is not professionally trained, but at the same time is combat experienced, and seeing the past successes in quotation marks of the DNR seem to be that they more or less waste human lives they are being given, that they push them into the front line without any regard to losses, and that they would do this somewhat different with mobilized personnel would obviously be a big surprise. So the videos are still popping up despite all attempts to censor them, despite reports of Russian soldiers being forced to recount the videos, to say something different, to say that it wasn't meant this way, or that all the problems have been solved. All of these attempts, they still keep popping up, the videos, which shows us some deep-rooted problems on the Russian side here. And we also have reports that soldiers from Tatarstan that had contracts that were volunteers, they tried to get out of the military and weren't let out, obviously because of the mobilization. That basically meant that if you had a contract, you are no longer allowed to leave it. And now, after doing their time, they didn't want to continue fighting in a battle, in a war that is causing high casualties, and they deserted and went home, and now they're being caught and being trialed as deserters. And there's also a report from Russia itself that supposedly they want to recruit 400,000 additional contract soldiers to make up for the losses and especially to increase the size of the Russian armed forces. Officially, they want to increase the armed forces to 1.5 million now, for which they intend to hire another 400,000 contract soldiers. Where they are supposed to come from, obviously, it will be the secret for the Russians. There are reports that several oblasts are already preparing the paperwork and the propaganda campaigns and everything to recruit those soldiers. We could assume that there might be some pressure towards the regular conscripts to sign up for contract soldiers. There are reports again and again, and there have been in the past, of massive pressure, even down to outright violence, in regards to conscripts, that they sign contracts for to become contract soldiers. But this, at this very point, it's more or less speculation. What we do know is that Russia officially wants to hire 400,000 additional contract soldiers, and they are setting up the logistics, the if you want it, so the propaganda logistics, the advertisement, the paperwork, and all of this to start the process fairly soon. In the political sphere, we have more news from Prigozhin. Again, he was close to the front line in Bakhmut. He was localized. The localization of his position was 1.5 kilometers close to the center of Bakhmut. And he actually declared that in 2024, he's going to run for president, not in Russia, but in Ukraine. Obviously, that is pointless because he can't run as a Russian, and he's probably wanted for war crimes in Ukraine. But it shows us which fight he's fighting now, and that is far less the fight for Bakhmut than the fight to stay in the limelight. I think the saying is to stay in the spotlight, to keep the attention on him, to make sure his position that he fought for last year is not taken away from him. Because right now, everything points towards the direction that the military want to basically eliminate him and Wagner. They are increasingly reducing the contact he has. He can no longer call them on the phone. Him and his personnel have no more access to military installations. But while they are still on the front line, there are continuous complaints about the lack of artillery ammunition. They have been cut off from recruiting as well. It increasingly seems that the Ministry of Defense is now taking its revenge on what was done during the last year, where Prigozhin was very vocal in his attacks against the military leadership for incompetence, while boosting his own image as the only one still achieving anything in the Russia-Ukrainian war. Now the Ministry of Defense is obviously taking its revenge, and by cutting off Wagner from supplies and from recruits while they are still on the front line. So every soldier they are losing now, every fighter they are losing now will most likely not be replaceable. It seems, though, that this is a campaign solely by the Ministry of Defense, so probably Shoigu and Gerasimov, the chief of the general staff and the defense minister, whom both he has attacked in the past, where there are even rumors that he tried to do some kind of coup attempt in their regard, so not directed towards Putin, but there was supposedly a conspiracy between Kadyrov, Prigozhin, and Surovikin, the general then leading the Russian forces in Ukraine, to make Surovikin the supreme commander, to turn Prigozhin into the defense minister, and Kadyrov was supposed to become the head of the National Guard. While this conspiracy is not proven, it at least would fit into a lot of other mosaic puzzles of information we have from that era, of the orders to not report positively about Surovikin anymore, of the reports that basically since then the mentioning of Wagner and of Prigozhin has more or less ceased. If they are talking about non-regular forces, they are talking about volunteers in assault units. Another indication that here Wagner's importance and Prigozhin's position are to be undermined by the Ministry of Defense. This is only from the Ministry of Defense, though, because right now 40 to 42 recruitment centers are being opened all over Russia by Wagner, where Prigozhin tries to make up for the losses. Now he has to compete, though, with other volunteer units, with other PMCs, like the ones run by Gazprom, for instance. And which will be very difficult to make up for the losses. But we see there that this is not a concerted effort by the government, by the Russian government, as we have reports that Wagner men, personnel from Wagner was allowed to go at schools for propaganda efforts to tell school children about heroic efforts, basically to win them over to later join Wagner. This would not be allowed if it was the Russian government actually intending to take out Wagner and Prigozhin as a total, but it shows that the efforts are mostly done only from the Ministry of Defense. The deputy prime minister from Russia, Irina Vershuk, also said that Russia the deputy prime minister, this is a different topic, the deputy prime minister of Ukraine, Irina Vershuk, said Russia has deported 2,161 orphans to Russia. They expect them to be adopted by Russians, so basically being Russified, taking the children into Russian families to assimilate them into the Russian people. In total, the deputy prime minister said that roughly 150,000 children have been brought into Russia, or she would say deported, under various schemes. In total, the accusation is now 150,000 children are being taken out of Ukraine into Russia. And finally, we have some more images here from Spain. In Spain, there are Ukrainian soldiers right now training on the Leopard 2A4, getting ready for deployment. Those are supposedly them. I think that's a Ukrainian uniform we see here. And the Spaniards are preparing Ukrainians to use them. And actually, the report is that this week they are being sent. They're finishing their training, and the tanks are ready to be sent into Ukraine. We also have this here, which shows us, I think it's from Grafenwöhr in Germany, and it shows us Bradleys together with Humvees, and the Bradleys are there, and there we have an M113 that are being used to train Ukrainian soldiers and to get them ready for deployment as well, allowing future Ukrainian offensives as well. And finally, we have some interesting video here. When we talk about self-propelled howitzers, we always talk about how easy it is for them, or that they are much more capable to avoid counter-battery fire. We have an impressive video here of seeing how an M777 in Ukrainian hands, how fast it can operate. I have to say I was massively surprised to see that here, and we see them here. Now the timer is, they fire, and now you see 90 seconds that how long it's supposed to take for them to withdraw. Let me just check, because there's probably music on it. So you see the speed with which they are at disassembling it, at getting it ready to be moved by the truck here, even though it is a drawn artillery piece, not a self-propelled one. It still can be impressively mobile, especially as the M777 was designed to be lightweight and thus highly mobile. See them here? Despite there still obviously being potential for speeding things up, you see that they are in their way at times. You see them now entering the truck, and the timer is at 20 seconds when they start driving. So impressive feat here, by that way showing the potential even drawn artillery piece has, artillery still has today. That's it from me for now. I hope you enjoyed what I did. If you do so, please hit the like button and leave a comment. That really helps a lot with the algorithm. And if you're new here, I would like to invite you to subscribe to the channel and hit the bell icon so you don't miss future videos. This channel is only possible because of the support from viewers like you. So if you'd like to support the channel, you can do so by the means in the description. Thank you very much to everyone already supporting the channel. That's it from me for now. Thank you for watching, and I'll be back.